Today, we're looking at a brown ink by Thornton's Brown. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below, but if you've got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire video. If you'd like, you can follow me over on Instagram as an ink guy. Also, if you're new here, I do fountain pen ink reviews daily, so I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then inked up the Parker Jotter with a medium nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. I standardized my first writing sample by using Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper on all of the tests that I do. I do use other papers, and some of those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in cartridge form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, little bits of shading are showing there. The extra fine is darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, light peppering of some shading, 14 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 19 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, and there's only a light peppering of it in the extra fine. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading. The extra fine is darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 18 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 25 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show no color variation, and there was none in the writing. And Rhodia, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, little peppering of shading throughout, little spots, not tons, but there is some. 13 seconds to dry. The medium is darker than the extra fine, just a little bit darker. With no feather spread, halo sheen, there's little spots that more what looks like is it's a little lighter. Like you look at the left side of the J in jumps, it's a little bit lighter than what's going on. You look at the W in the brown, there's tiny little bits, but not really. 18 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation far left to far right. The medium shows none. And we really got little pepperings of it in the extra fine. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we can really see that it is quite red leaning, but it's very moving up, very light. You see the red, the light red. You see the red get darker, but at the very top, where the red is more gathered, you really start to see the brown tone of this particular dye. Now the one on the right that I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, the brown of it being darker does show a bit better at the top than it did in the previous one. No real difference though between these two chromatographies other than the fact that I marked the one filter. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handled itself really well, surprisingly well. I would have no problem using this ink in a note-taking situation if I wanted to be able to go back and highlight. Water is completely reactivating and lifting this off the page, and it's also all that I needed to get it out of my pen. Now Pen Flush does everything that water does, nothing more, and the 1/3 bleach solution completely obliterates it, but you're not going to need that. I test viscosity or flow with a thing called a tilt test. I'll link it somewhere down below or up in the cards. Now for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Thornton's Brown has a viscosity of 1.67, making this a very wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all of those. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Thornton's brown has an average dry time of 18 seconds, so despite it being very wet, its dry time is normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Thornton's brown, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went for a nice green, and I chose Robert Oster's Evergreen. The second writing sample is done on Levenger, Franklin Christoph, and black and red paper. Here we're looking at Levenger paper. Now we get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does offer some spots of shading, like if you look at the word brown, it certainly starts darker and works its way lighter. Extra fine is a tad darker than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, no sheen, no shade. 8 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get any. Here we have Franklin Christoph paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 9 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get it in the writing. And last here, black and red notebook, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade, 10 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine. It does have feathering. Look at the word quick at what's going on. Look at the PS of jumps with what's going on. A lot of tiny little feathering, but not so out of control you couldn't read it. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 16 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine does show some color variation, although we didn't get it. The medium shows none, and we got none, and that is all that I have for writing samples. So what do I think of Thornton's brown? It's certainly a red-leaning brown, which isn't something that I'm opposed to, but the entire time when I was writing with it, I just never got to that spot where I said this is okay. I never liked the tone brown that is put down on the page. What nib and pen is going to give the best writing experience with this ink? You need to use a gusher of a pen to truly get a nice brown down. Otherwise, you can get quite a bit of that red showing its way through. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. Thanks for watching.